Come on. No more fucking around. Come on.
Been around the world twice, talked to everyone once. Seen 2 whales fuck, been to 3 world fairs. And I even know a man in Thailand with a wooden cock. I push more Peter, more sweeter, and more completer than any other Peter pusher around. I'm a hard-bodied, hairy-chested, rootin', tootin', shootin', parachuting, demolition, double cap, crimping frogman. There ain't nothing I can't do, no sky too high, no sea too rough, no muff too tough. Learned a lot of lessons in my life. Never shoot a large caliber man with a small caliber bullet. Drive all kinds of trucks. 2x, 4x, 6x. Those big motherfuckers that bend and go when you step on the brakes. Anything in life worth doing is worth overdoing. Moderation's for cowards. I'm a lover, I'm a fighter, I'm a UDT Navy SEAL diver. I'll wine, dine, intertwine, then sneak out the back door when the refueling is done. So if you're feeling froggy, then you better jump, because this frogman's been there, done that, and is going back for more. Cheers, boys.
The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
You good?
Good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Man podcast. I am your host, Zach Schenken. Today, we have another guest on. Super excited about having Ryan on today. He's a friend of mine from high school. He reached out about some of the stuff I've been putting out recently, and we just got to talking, and I figured, he was sharing a little bit about how he's been. We hadn't talked in a while since close to high school, and so he reached out, and I was super excited, and I think his story is one that needs to be shared and people can find value from. So excited to get into it today. For those that want to follow along what we're doing with the podcast, and myself on Instagram, you can follow at Vitruvian Gentleman for the podcast and the program I'm working on, as well as myself personally at ZDSCHENKEN on Instagram. And if you've been enjoying the podcast thus far, DM me the word podcast, share your thoughts, share ideas of future podcast topics you want to hear me talk about or guests you would like to have on. Trying to reach out to as many people as I can and expand out of my current circle. So curious to see, what people have. But Ryan, welcome to the show, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you.
Pleasure to be here.
Appreciate you taking the time. We earlier today, for those that may see this and we're in our gym attire, we hit a workout earlier and then got lunch. So this is definitely the stinkiest podcast if we were recording this in smell-o-vision. But definitely,
especially after a leg day.
Dude, I know. Brutal, but fun. How did you like? I kind of took you along my usual routine. How did you like it?
Yeah, no, I liked it a lot. I haven't done a lot of those workouts, especially the
Nordics.
Yeah, I hadn't done those since probably high school football workouts.
Did they actually have you guys doing those then?
Yeah, you would just get behind the other person.
Hold the heels.
Yeah.
Dude, those are sick. We don't have to turn this into a gym bro episode, but
no, yeah, I like those though. Yeah, I like the idea of splitting,
interior, posterior. Yeah.
So.
It's helpful when you're doing 2 leg days a week. I think it just you can do a little more isolation. I mean, it's definitely more of a bodybuilding style, but I don't think that I wouldn't say that what we did today doesn't make you not athletic. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I think it's a blend of both.
Definitely. Definitely.
Which is why I've I don't know. I kind of just like to screw around. There wasn't too much programming. It was kind of just what do we want to do here, and you feel it out. But
yeah,
it was fun. Glad we could do that. But it's been a long time. We were able to catch up a little bit ahead of time, but I guess we can wind back the clock to our days in fellowship. I kind of talked to both Joshes went to fellowship, so a lot of fellowship blood on the pod so far. I'm curious.
First lifer.
Yeah, first lifer though. That's a clouded claim. So you did fellowship from K5, I guess, all the way to graduating.
Yeah.
So your experience was even longer than my own when I joined in 4th grade. I'm curious. I want to hear a little bit about what was your fellowship experience like. I think it's different for everyone. I'm curious.
I'd say overall it was definitely a great thing. when I look back on it, I'm very thankful that I was there. I mean, it wasn't until probably middle school that I even realized like there was another type of school out there. You know, I didn't really think about public schools. And then, I mean, I played sports with, you know, public schools and Junior Hornets and Roswell and stuff, but that was about the extent of my contact with, I don't know, public school
The other
kids.
side.
Yeah, yeah. And then as I started getting older, probably about 8th grade, I was like begging my parents to transfer to not Roswell because
Fuck no.
not at the time. Yeah.
Respectfully.
I was trying to hardship into Milton. So
In middle school?
Yeah. No. For like at the end of 8th grade year.
Okay.
For high school, and then it basically was a pretty hard process to get approved since I didn't really have a good reason to not go to Roswell in their eyes. So my parents, after I fought them for a while, were, you know, they said they would allow it, but they were gonna kind of make me do most of the legwork for getting in. I had to like say I wanted to take a very specific set of classes that weren't offered at Roswell or something weird, you know, some intricate excuse. So
Yeah.
Anyways, I ended up staying, which was definitely the best decision that I didn't make for myself, really. But
Dude, interesting.
it, you know, in middle school, you know, especially with kind of the advent of Instagram and that starting to be like a commonly used platform, seeing what I thought was like the cool public school kids, like, you know, after basketball games, you know, some of them had girlfriends and they would, you know, like go bowling together without their parents. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, damn it, I wish my parents would let me do that. Or, you know, they had parties and like the parents didn't come downstairs and there was like a DJ. And I remember like going to the party and like for the first time, like danced like, you know, dirty with a girl. and I was so like, it was so appealing to me. 'Cause it was so taboo.
Your first time being a man.
Yeah. And so I had that view. So I was like, oh, I want to be a part of that. Like
wanted to escape the bubble.
I'm like a nerdy, like private school kid. And I started realizing like people shit talk private school kids a lot. And I was like, oh, like, I've been around the same people, mostly like in terms of when I was looking back on, well, guys and girls. I guess I just wanted to, you know,
Expand.
see what it was like.
Yeah.
And try it out. But it ended up, you know, if I'm being honest with myself, if I was in public school and high school, I definitely would have been surrounded by a group of friends that were probably not helpful, you know, to my growth.
Yeah.
Probably, you know, heavily the opposite. So, you know, when I look at like the friends I was blessed with, you know, a couple of other lifers in particular, and just I guess the families they came from, and the like kinds of lifestyles that were promoted, you know, like were, I don't know, morally healthy and like ethical, you know, very similar minded.
Sure.
I guess, you know, what you might typically find in like a, you know, a well off community, in the suburbs. But basically, once I got to senior year, really once I got involved in sports, I stopped thinking about trying to, you know, like go to public school. Like, started realizing how like blessed I was to have the friends I had. Yeah. And the environment, as much of a bubble as it was, you know, I think some kids are, you know, everyone's different. So some kids maybe like are better off without that guardrail, and you know they get exposed earlier in their life, but they can handle, you know, those decisions. Whereas I don't know, in public or private school, I felt like those kind of, I don't know, maybe as a parent would say, like those temptations kind of manifest later in high school, as opposed to maybe like 8th grade or 9th grade. You know, you would hear, or I would hear like stories of, you know, those kids I played, the bad kids, had played or, you know, had gotten caught at a party or like snuck out or something, and like that, I definitely would have been, I think, as strong as I thought I was in my mindset, influenced, with the group I would have been around. So, yeah, definitely a positive experience. It definitely had some, its downfalls as every school would, but I don't know. I felt like it was very legalistic at times.
Yeah.
It was almost the idea that if it wasn't, centered around like God or the Bible, it almost couldn't be talked about sometimes. Whereas, I feel like a healthy environment would have been like, no, this should be like not taboo. It shouldn't be only not taboo. It should be like promoted,
Actively discussed.
Yes, like these are the things you're about to be exposed to, and I don't feel like holding that back or holding that information back. And I don't know, giving advice to the kids like is a bad thing. Honestly, yeah, I think there's a fine line between, I guess, exposure and, waiting till maybe like someone is mature enough to be exposed to something. But personally, I felt like the line could have been pushed more towards being exposed more, and, kind of learning or getting that maturity a little bit earlier as far as dealing with maybe situations that you're not comfortable with. And in that sense, I think it was a little sheltered.
Did you feel like that affected you, like when you were making your transition to college? Like, we exit this like Christian-centric private school background. You may have gone to like a couple parties in high school. Like I was like literally completely sheltered to it. Like I never went to any of the parties, and part of that was me being like kind of a self-righteous little bastard. Like I was like too smart to do it, and I have this like future, blah blah blah. Like those kids, whatever. Like that was a lot of ego talking, maybe internally, but regardless, I wasn't exposed to it. But like even you said, like you weren't the biggest partier in high school. Maybe went to like one or two things.
Yeah.
And then obviously transitioning to a major public university in University of Georgia, like getting exposed to the fraternity life. Like I had kind of the same thing at Georgia Tech. Do you feel like it was detrimental? Like when you made that transition, like the world opens up, right? And now it's like no one's going to tell you what you can and cannot do. What was that transition like?
It was pretty intense, honestly. So, and I can give like more background to this if it comes up. But the transition was rough. So I, like at the end of senior year of high school, right before spring break, had a random, literally they just call it like a flare-up of OCD. And I didn't even know that's what it was at the time, but it basically like got extremely bad, like extremely quick, and like flipped my life upside down. So honestly, looking back, probably should have taken a year off and like fully. I mean, I saw a psychologist and like actively tried to deal with it, but definitely wasn't mature enough to be going to it like that new phase of life with such a big like, I don't know, playground. And the state of mind that I was in was probably not a good one to be at, a freshman at UGA with. But, so a lot, probably my entire first year, most of my first year was like the forefront of what was going on in my life. And it felt like everything else was kind of playing behind that. So what I used to escape that was just, trying new things and, exposing myself to everything I'd been sheltered from in high school. So, partially I'd say I align with, the example of the kid that is, sheltered in high school and then
goes kind of wild.
Yeah, it goes wild and then, looks back after a little bit and is like, what am I doing? So that definitely happened with me. I got to that point probably later on in college, and especially recently after I've graduated in the past year. I think being away from and for anyone who's listening, I've moved back in at home just to save some money for. It's coming up on a year now, and it's helped me in a lot more ways than I thought. I thought it was gonna suck, and I was gonna hate it, but being away from distractions and really giving yourself time, to not focus on other people. It's like I feel like a lot of times people are so focused on what other people are doing, they don't even like know themselves enough to, sit with themselves for 5 minutes and be, have like a conversation with themselves. It's interesting, but I mean, to answer that question straight up, I think there was definitely detrimental parts.
Do you think your response to like turn to exploring substances and like whatever else, like, and you can be as explicit or inexplicit as you want, like sharing your story, knowing that it is going to be public, but like experimenting with all that stuff, do you think it was like the pendulum swinging from like sheltered private school kid to I just want to try everything that's out there because no one can stop me? Or was it more like I am battling with like the OCD anxiety thing and like I don't know how to handle that right now, so like the only time I feel okay is when I'm...
It started out like that.
The second?
Yeah, so it was like I really just want to feel like myself for a couple of hours. My mind in that state, and without giving like a lecture of what it is, OCD is a general anxiety disorder, and most of the time people hear about it, it's you have a mental obsession, and then a physical compulsion. So people will straighten things, or you have cleaners, you have germaphobes. There's like, I think the last book I read, there was like 7 categories that they technically use now for different OCD. But one of them is, I might butcher this term, it's scripturosity or scriptural, something like that. But it revolves around like moral things, which, it was weird. So, I'd obviously grown up in a Christian household and environment, and what was weird about it was it's more of a, there's not really like a physical aspect to it. It's like a mental compulsion, or a mental obsession and a mental compulsion.
Interesting.
So it started out with, let's see. I started feeling, this is really weird, I started feeling the urge to like confess things to my parents. Like same idea as if you were, I don't know, maybe like a second grader or something. Like you're
like the guilt starts wearing on you.
Yeah, like it's like you're responsible to your parents for like the wrong doings. And you're like, oh, even if it doesn't concern them, right? So it's like, oh, I cheated in school today, and it's like, wait, I just lost my train of thought.
You're talking about like scripturosity and being like, it's like both a compulsion and a
it's a
obsession.
Yeah. So I was like, if I had done something to, let's say I like stole something out of a store in 8th grade, and I was a senior in high school at the time, and I was sitting there and like having that thought, and I was like, oh, remember when I stole that, right? So normally if you had that thought, it'd be a fleeting thought. It'd be like, oh yeah, I remember that, huh? But with me, it was like I couldn't. Once I thought about it, I couldn't get it out of my head. So it would be like, what? Then I'd want to do something. So I guess the physical compulsion was confession.
Expressing it.
So I remember going up to my parents, and that was like the first thing I was telling them, because I had been in my head. I had said it was like sitting on my heart. Like I need to get this off my chest.
Sure.
But I noticed it was an odd like source of guilt. I was like very aware of what I was feeling, and that it wasn't like normal.
Right. It wasn't like a moral thing. It was
right.
Like,
but I was like, this is weird, but like maybe God's just putting this on my heart, And then I remember came home from like practice that day. I told my parents at dinner, and they were like, wait, when did you say that happened? Like 8th grade? And I was like, yeah. And they were kind of like looked at each other and they were like, why are you like,
Why bring
I
it
mean,
now?
like, yeah, like why?
Yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't have done that. But that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't really know. Like, I just felt like I needed to tell you. And they're like, okay, like, thanks.
Thanks. Throw it in the logbook.
And then, went to bed that night and couldn't go to sleep because I was obsessing over, like, if I told them every single detail of the story.
Right.
So I was like, did I steal, like, one or two things? Or, like, did I tell them, like, the exact story, like, exactly how it happened? Or, like, did I mix some of the details up, like, without knowing because I was trying to hide and, like, I'm still lying? Like, it got, like, very, this is where it gets, like, very odd. There's someone who hasn't experienced it. It's, like, it's hard to imagine. But, that started kind of like an initial wave of anxiety. I was like, I just confessed this and, like, I'm still feeling like I need to say something about it. And that kept me up for a while. I remember the next morning talking to them again and they were like, you already talked to us about this. Like, why are you telling us a detail, like that small detail that doesn't need to be told?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't understand. Like, I'm just, and they didn't have any idea of, what it was and I didn't either. And then school started getting really, really hard to, like, sit in just one class period. So your mind kind of, like, in that state jumps from whatever you view. It's called, I want to say, it actually has to do with, like, Freudian theory.
Sure.
Like the id, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Your mind will it'll, like, attach itself to whatever you view as, like, the worst sin. That's why it's kind of revolved around morals, right? So first it was, confessing about, I don't know, maybe stealing something, right, in like 8th grade. And then let's see, what was the next thing? So this is, actually, it's a classification now, but it's called gay OCD. And it's basically, so my mind jumped from, like, confessing, oh, like, I'm a bad person because I've lied. Like, I need to, get that off my chest. Oh, then it was like, what if I'm gay and I don't know it? Like, what if I am, all these, like,
Yeah.
the idea was, it was, like, very subconscious. So it was happening, like, behind the scenes. And it got so, like, intense, basically, that, it was, like, causing full-blown, like, panic attacks where I was like, what if I, it's the idea, I say pain in the ass of, these OCD compulsions is it's, what if, like.
Mm-hmm. Were you experiencing it all, like, same-sex attraction at all, or do you think it was
No,
just because
no,
it was
no.
like
Yeah.
you're in an environment where being gay is a sin? And, like,
Exactly. So, and I was like that in my head. I was like that. Like, you can't anything
be
else
because...
can be wrong, but, like, I cannot be that. Like, anything else.
Oh wow.
And then so it'd be like, and I was like, why am I, like, I think I never thought about this before. Like, no, like, I'm not, like, let's go, like, on with it,
Yeah.
It's something you don't think about. It's, it's like, it's an attraction, right? It's like a feeling, right? So then it was a feeling, right? And then I would start, like, your mind, you want to, compulsion, you want to, like, test it. So you're like, so if we'd be, like, for instance, if we were walking at the gym just like an hour ago, and let's say you look over in the mirror and you see someone, like, curling a weight, literally just, like, curling a weight, and you're like, oh, like that dude has a big arm. And then, normal, you just look over and like, oh, sick, keep going. But for me, it was like, did I just look at his arm, like, in a sexual way, or was that, like, a normal way? Like,
oh wow.
Like, so questioning, like, every single intention of every single thought, right? Which you can imagine, like, starts to take a toll pretty fast, because it's like your mind's running a million miles an hour constantly, trying to reassure yourself of whatever you're thinking about, that it's not true or that it's not going to happen. So started seeing a psychologist, and basically the idea was, it's called let's see, behavioral therapy. It's
Cognitive behavior.
yeah. It's cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, ERP, exposure response prevention. But the idea is like run towards the fire in general. And in this particular case, the way that looks is you confront the thought and you like pursue it. So not only are you like, stopping as if it was chasing you and turning towards it, like you're turning around and you're running full speed at it, like, metaphorically. Which will, I guess, will come up later on, but, ended up being like something that stuck with, like, really started becoming like a transformational thing. But basically, let's see, where were we with?
Like as you're entering college.
Yeah. So
wanting to feel like yourself.
Right. Yeah. So I start to see, or the work on the whatever gay OCD is like, exposing. This is gonna sound weird.
No, go ahead.
Like you write scripts is what they call it. So you write a bunch of scripts. So if I were to write on a piece of paper, so let's say, okay, so a common actually example is why, like a wife will have, or a woman will have a newborn baby, and they have like this horrible fear that they're gonna like be in the kitchen and just pick up a knife all of a sudden and like stab it.
Interesting.
So that's like a very common housewife, quote unquote housewife OCD that psychologists see. It could be a lot of people. A common one is people are scared like they're gonna just be driving on a bridge and all of a sudden like lose control and just decide that they want to drive off the bridge.
Yep.
So they won't drive on bridges. Like they're terrified. They do anything they can to avoid them. Or, what if I'm on this plane and all of a sudden like I, get possessed and like open the plane door and like, everyone dies.
Yeah.
Super irrational thoughts.
Yeah.
But the problem is you can't address them rationally because you say, oh, that's not going to happen. Like I wouldn't do that.
But then your brain runs it back.
Well, what if? How do you know that? Like, how do you know? And then you go, well, I've done this. Like, I'm not going to blow this plane up. I'm not going to, drive off the building. Like, I'm a sane person. I have no reason to think I would. But in your brain's like, well, remember that time 5 years ago when you like did this? Like, that was kind of like unhinged. Like, what if you did that again? Kind of like similar, but you just drove off the bridge. And it's like. Oh, well, and then you try to reason with that, and then you start thinking of something else, and so it's like endless. So, anyways, the idea is just addressing it head on. So, let's say if it was a car thing, or with the gay OCD, you're like, yes, the script would be like, one day I decide that I'm driving my car and I'm gonna drive it off the bridge. So you try to make it like as graphic as you can. So obviously, I won't do that with the gay OCD, but the idea is exposure. So, you're surrounding yourself as much as you can, like in your head as you're writing it down. And you're trying to like provoke the anxiety to come up.
Yeah.
So, you'd be like, all right, like I'm imagining myself driving down the road over a bridge. I lose control. Like I hit another car. As I hit the other car, like I've, run someone over and they fall off the bridge, and then I get slingshotted out of my front seat, like get decapitated on the, you try to, just anything to make you be like, oh my God, like this is so bad. Like,
are you writing these scripts alone? Like, is this an exercise?
And then you're reading them over and over, and like 30 minutes at a time.
Okay. So
you're really just sitting there, and like, it can, like, it's really hard in the beginning because you want to get up and just like run, like just to like, and eventually, you start to learn, like, you sit in it and you literally just sit in it and you're like, I can deal with this. Like, yeah, this sucks, but I can deal with it, and you start to, really it's, it's neuroplasticity. It's rewiring, thoughts and creating new patterns in your brain. Each time, the thoughts come up, whereas maybe your response originally was, yeah, I can't drive. Like, no way. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm going away from that. And now your response is, I've done this a million times. If I die, like today's my day, then today's my day. But I'm not going to let it get in the way, So you, after a while, it becomes a learned response. And that's basically how you, address it and get over it. And, from time to time, like, it switches, like, subjects, I guess. So the me in particular, the gay OCD lasted maybe like 2 weeks. And then it jumped to like, a different obsession. So it'd be like, for example, once I got into college, it was like, what if, like, am I drinking too much? Like, am I going to become like an alcoholic? Like, what if I'm an alcoholic and I don't even know it? Like, what if this continues and like, I'm going to ruin my life? I had obviously no like rational basis around this,
Mm-hmm.
but that's, kind of the bitch of OCD is it's super irrational, but you can't control
stop
it.
Yeah.
You have to just let it go. Like you literally, you let it run its course. And when you start, when I would start obsessing, so, it's obviously a lot easier said than done. And it took me literally years to like get to where I am with it today. But
You were saying like about how it's been a long journey, and as the obsessions were kind of shifting and altering as you came into college, from the gay OCD to like the alcoholic thing.
Oh yeah, and then it'd be anyways, it's so what you come to learn is it's not the object. Your mind will jump once you address one thing, like it's gonna go to something else. It'll go to whatever.
So the OCD exists as a compulsion,
Right.
or as a mental illness, whatever you want to call it, right? And that will just bounce to the new
different
target.
part of different areas of your life. It's so I started to realize like it doesn't matter. It's like whatever I decide, or whatever I guess subconsciously is like off limits to me, like that's what it's gonna go to. So it'll go. It slowly. I started realizing it would spread basically to all areas of my life, and then that's basically when I would say I hit like rock bottom. Was some point in freshman year. Basically was having constant panic attacks. It started in the summer, and actually put me in a state. It's called unreality or unreality, depersonalization. They're similar. Depersonalization is you don't feel like you're like connected with yourself, kind of.
It's like an out of body experience almost.
Yeah, and then unreality or disreality is you feel like disconnected from your actual like environment. So a little bit of both. More so unreality or disreality. I had a friend who had been like experienced depersonalization and basically, for example, said like he didn't feel like his arms, like he was like were his arms, like he didn't feel like he could control them, like
Whoa.
like really weird stuff like that. It's really hard to explain.
Yeah.
And after a series of panic attacks, or I guess it'd be easier to say fight or flight responses. That's what anxiety is, right? It's fight or flight. So, to give like a metaphor, if this is what I read in a book, if you were in like the jungle, right, and a tiger came up on you, or I guess a jaguar would be in the jungle or something, but
Sure. But maybe both.
and then you go into fight or flight, you decide to fight, but that fails. So after your like body decides that like you've lost the fight and you're about to die, it basically goes into like this shock mode, and like numbs like your experiences almost.
Yeah.
It's kind of, which is I guess hypothetically good in that situation, where you're about to get mauled to death, so you don't feel as much pain. But when you're in a suburban, neighbor or college, if I'm at college, and there's not lions walking around or immediate danger, it's like very unsettling, because you're having this freak response, but like everything around you is fine.
So like when you would have a panic attack, talk me through like what is going on. Like, are you hyperventilating? Do you close yourself in a room? Are you sweating? Like,
so it normally would start. So, let's see. So I get on this kind of like train of thought where it's like, this isn't going to go away. Okay, so what it really developed into was like this experience that I keep having of these kind of waves of like I would have like a good week and then like a bad week. And then, you know, after the bad week, I would like totally forget about the good week and be like, oh, I'm back where I was before. Like I'm back to where I was before. And I was looking at it like completely wrong. I mean, I was viewing that as like setbacks instead of, I guess, ways not to address the problem. But the particular thought pattern was like, this is never going to go away. This is never going to go away. And then I would literally like mentally talk myself into the panic attack. You know, and I would start like as far as physical feelings. So I'll just walk you through one that I mean, the last one I can remember having was probably like back in October of 21, at least full blown, and basically just woke up, you know, in that feeling of like dread, but there's nothing to dread about. Like, it's just like waking up and it's like, you know, the first thing that comes to your mind is like, wow, I hate this feeling, number one, and like, I don't want to get out of bed and like go through the whole day like this. Like, this sucks. So, you know, I would just like confront that, you know, and say, like, I'm going to make this day like a good day. Like, it's up to me. You know, maybe the circumstances are out of my control, but, you know, my responses are always in my control. So like, I was trying to stay very positive, but, I would, you know, wake up like within an hour. If you're not being like aggressive, it would kind of, you know, stay there. If you weren't addressing it, so I would, you know, kind of let it like sit there, and be lazy about it and just be like, oh, this will go away. Like, I don't want to deal with this right now. Like, I don't want to think about this. Like, I wish I felt good. Like, I wish I felt like my old self, you know, get into those destructive thoughts. And then basically would slowly, I mean, I could feel like my heart rate go up, you know, have like some hot flashes, and it would always ending in me just like breaking down and crying, for like a few minutes. And then that would like, I guess physically, literally would like release, you know, I don't know, whatever
Tension.
hormones in your body are released, or, you know, whatever chemicals, but it was like finally, like my brain would like slow down for a little bit. And then it would pick up, you know, a few hours later, and then it would happen again. And then, you know, after a few really bad ones, I got stuck in that disreality state, where, because my brain was like, well, you're getting like mini panic attacks a day, like, so something must be wrong. So like, I'm gonna numb you out. And that experience in and of itself caused a lot of anxiety, because I was like, now I'm like sure that I'm going insane. So that was the next thing I obsessed over. So it was like, I'm like a schizophrenic, you know, paranoid, like everything mentally wrong, you know. I remember sitting in psychology, learning about some of those disorders, and that was like the worst week of school that year for me, because I was like, I have all these, all these. And then it was like, what if I have this? Like, oh my gosh, like, I used to think my life was going to be so good. Like, I had a lot going for me. Like, oh well, like now my life is like this, you know? But yeah, and you know, those were like the thoughts I was having when, you know, I was starting to get these panic attacks. So they would just like build off of each other. A vicious cycle. So I'd be like, oh, I hate this feeling. Like, I feel disconnected. Like, oh, why do I feel disconnected? Well, like, something else is wrong here. Like, it's not just anxiety. Like, you probably like schizophrenic, or like, you know, multiple personality, bipolar, something crazy, like something that, you know, in my head, I was like, oh, like, that's, you know, that's those, you know, I don't know. That doesn't happen around like my community. Like, there's no schizophrenic people in here. You know, it was mental health. It was taboo, I guess, still. And so that, you know, freaked me out. And then it would escalate to like, oh, this is never going to go away. Like, you know, I'm screwed. My life is screwed. And then that would just basically send me into like a full blown panic attack. And then it would be like, you know, after I got stuck in that state of disreality. I mean, it lasted like a good year probably, of constant, like, I mean, I remember waking up at campus and like walking to class and just looking around and feeling like I was like walking in a video game. Wow. Like, very unsettling feeling, especially when it's happening 24/7. So that, yeah, I mean, that's basically how the panic attacks.
Outward facing, like, you know, when you're breaking down, like, how much would you say, like, other people are witnessing it? Like, did you have close friends be like, hey, man, like, what's going on? Or, like, were you expressing any of this that was going on to people that you love to care about, your parents? Were you seeing a psychologist at this point? Like, what was the timeline?
I started seeing a OCD specialist pretty soon after, pretty soon after I graduated high school, probably like June or July of that summer. But no, I've always been very good at hiding my emotions. I've just never been, not really on purpose, I've just never really been super like expressive. Yeah. And so outwardly, I mean, people who knew me well would notice, but mainly my parents, because, you know, they'd see me like pacing around at home whenever I was at home, or like, yeah, just not being able to sit still. The biggest thing, which sucked too, because I'm super into the gym, is I couldn't, like, my anxiety response is, you know, some people eat a lot, like mine was the opposite. So I was having a hard time literally eating like one meal a day. So I was losing a ton of weight. Then, you know, that was like another like negative in my mind, because then I was going to the gym, like, was losing strength, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, what else could go wrong? Like, everything, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think outwardly, I was just trying to get that, you know, just trying to make it.
Just taking it a day at a time.
Yeah. But yeah, would normally when I would come home, would, you know, get like a 2 weeks worth of energy, like break down, you know, and like get back on the horse and go after it again. And, you know, thankfully had full support with, you know, my parents and family. So, but if you were, yeah, like a bystander, even like a fraternity brother, definitely wouldn't have any idea. Even if it was like a full, I mean, I wouldn't be around if I was like, you know, about to cry. Yourself. But even when it was coming on, you know, I could like sit there and just like close my eyes kind of and be like, oh my God, like, this is horrible. But
did you feel the need to, I mean, I guess this gets into the space of like almost like the role as like a man, like, and this is you've kind of briefly poked at it from the sides, is like this idea, like, we come from, like, mental health is taboo, I think, a little bit in the Christian upbringing, but more so like just our Western, like, as a man, like, all the stuff that's out there, it's like you have to be stoic and emotionless and strong and a warrior spirit and all this stuff, and those are great ideals to aspire towards, but like, no one is without experiencing emotion. And so especially when you're dealing with this stuff, like, did you feel like having to hide it, like, just basically grit your teeth and be like, I'm losing my shit right now, but I have to like not break down in front of my friends, or like, you know, we're all eating dinner at the fraternity house and like I'm just like sitting here like tight as fuck, but I can't like kind of let it out, you know?
Like, oh, are you saying did that?
Like, do you feel like it was performative? Like why did you not?
Oh, just like let it out?
Yeah.
Probably the biggest thing, I was probably just embarrassed. I was like, I have anxiety. Like, no, I felt like a freak. Even though I was like, nobody else really knows the extent of this. I mean, some of my like closest friends knew, but you know, the idea, I guess the particular thing that I was dealing with was, you know, mental health obviously in general, right, is kind of taboo, and then you get to like this very niche like OCD type, and then, you know, your mind starts obsessing over like odd, you know, like the gay OCD thing. It's like that's like taboo, you know.
Sure.
And I was like, absolutely not. Like, if I tried to explain this to someone who literally like wasn't a psychologist, because even, you know, trying to get my parents to understand it, you know, they were like, what is going on? Like, this is so weird. Yeah. And obviously I felt like, you know, a huge freak, because I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't, you know, all of these things are happening. Like, I literally can't control my head. Like, I cannot control my mind, like what I'm thinking. So yeah, I guess that was probably the biggest thing. just embarrassment, people finding out and being like, oh, like, you freak.
Right.
I think, I mean, I would say, yeah, maybe some of it was just socially, like, you know, being a guy, like, I don't want to break down in front of a bunch of other people. Actually, that was definitely a big one. I mean, just thinking about it right now, obviously wouldn't enjoy doing that. And other than that, I definitely didn't, like, expect people to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I'm not going to waste their time. Like, they, you know, they got better and things to worry about than, like, my anxiety. I was downplaying it a lot in my head. I was like, this is anxiety, like, you know. When you say that to someone else, it's like, oh, like, man up, it's anxiety. And it's like, there's that kind of anxiety, and then there's, like, you know, clinical, like, actually, like, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's a difference, and, you know, but I didn't think people would understand that, so I was like, I'd just keep it to myself, kind of. You know.
Interesting. And did you ever, did you, like, date through college? Like, did this ever, did you ever have, like, an intimate partner or a relationship where they were, you know, behind the curtain a little bit and knew what was going on? And or did you date and kind of, like, try to hide it from them, and then did that, like, potentially manifest?
Yeah, I mean, I had a girlfriend in college, at the end of college. And, I mean, I talked to a few people in college. No one I talked to really knew much about it. I mean, I would say, like, yeah, I'm on medication for anxiety. Like, that was it basically in there. And, you know, a lot of people, come to find out, a lot of people were too. And, you know, it'd be like, oh, so am I. That would be the extent of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think my girlfriend in college knew how bad it was. I mean, she had, like, witnessed some of the panic attacks. Was very supportive about it, and you know, learned how to act around me, like, in that state, you know.
Yeah.
But it didn't. I wouldn't say it affected. I mean, sometimes I would obsess over odd things, like, what if we break up, like, or what if I'm wasting my time, like.
Yeah.
So, and it definitely caused, like, some problems there, on my side, but not problems that I would, like, bring up, like, oh, my OCD is like acting up today. Oh, what about breaking up, you know? So it's, like, something you can't really, like, specifically talk about, yeah. Right? But for the most part, I would say, I mean, didn't really affect relationships just because I didn't really get into many relationships.
Yeah. And then, so kind of circling back, you're kind of at this point, you're experiencing this extended period of dysreality, like, you're hitting your rock bottom. What was the path out? You know, you're already seeing a psychologist regularly.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think was the big change? Was it, like, an internal mindset thing? Like, I really need to get a grip on this, and, like, or did somebody step into your life and was like, hey, like, let's figure this out together? Like, what was the road out?
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting at rock bottom and basically thinking, like, I mean, it can't get any worse than this. You know, if I was to stay in this, like, state of constant, like, anxiety and depression and, like, sadness, like, this is no way to live. Like, I can't, you know, I literally won't be able to live like this. And that was right after freshman year of college ended. So we went to the beach with my family. We go on, like, a beach trip every year. So that week-long period of not being able, number one, just, like, go out at night and, like, forget about it, you know, forget about how bad my life was or something.
Sure.
And being able to, for the first time, like, really, like, man up and say, like, I'm gonna, like, face this, and, like, I'm not gonna get sad and, like, you know, go out to the bar and try to feel like myself again, and I'm not gonna, you know, distract myself with, you know, a number of other things that I could, like, if you want to deal with this and get over it and quote unquote feel like yourself again, like, you're gonna have to, you know, sack up and be a man about this.
And work.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, one thing that helped was, you know, just trying to be like thankful for my life and just looking at, you know, the poverty in the world in general, and saying, you know, at least I get like I'm waking up in a, you know, a comfortable beach house like with my family in Florida because like we are, you know, well off enough to have that, you know, blessing to be able to do that. And that started to change my mindset. But I mean, the biggest thing was getting away from the distractions. I think I wasn't mature enough at that point in college to be able to be on my own and not eventually give in to the distractions, and, you know, kind of take 2 steps back again. And once I realized that, I had like a, you know, breakthrough moment, or, you know, week, I guess, where I actually finally like started feeling like myself again. And I was like, it had literally been, I mean, probably like a year and a half. And it was like the first time I had finally felt like myself, not, you know, under the influence. And I'm pretty sure I started like tears started coming out of like joy because I was like, this is insane. Like, I can't believe this is finally happening. Like, I don't know how long this is going to last, but like the taste of, I don't know, like what's to come. So that feeling of finally of having that like breakthrough was definitely the like biggest thing. Was like, wow, it was the first time I'd seen a victory, you know, with myself and dealing with this. And that confidence was like, I mean, it was crucial. It was everything. Having that confidence to say, wow, I can do it. Like, I've gotten myself to this point. Obviously, like, there's going to be waves. And, you know, over time, I've learned, you know, really how to hone in and you know, live, like, you know, right now I'm living great. Like, I have a very, you know, blessed life, and you know, mentally am, when looking back, like, compared to then, and you know, it's like dark and light. You know, it's a complete difference. So that transformational, I think, week, and just really realizing that, you know, if I don't work on it, it's not going to go away. It was the first problem in my life that had arisen where it didn't like dissolve overnight, or, you know, in a week, like, this is going to be over once this happens. It was like, no, this isn't going to be over until like you address it, and it's going to be like hard, but you can do it, but it's not going to go away easy. It was like the first problem I had in my life like that, where it took, you know, constant work and effort, and this sounds cheesy, but, you know, like bravery, and just manning up and like hitting it head on, you know, whatever is in your life it is, you know, bringing you down or whatever, you know, I quickly found out, like, it needs to be addressed head on. That's always the best way to do it.
Yeah.
At least, you know, what I've experienced.
Definitely. And so now that you're in this kind of better place, obviously it's still, and will probably always be, like, an ongoing thing that you deal with. What are some current practices that you are finding are beneficial to your life? Obviously, actively continuing to see a psychologist is helpful. Like, professional help is always helpful. Medication is always helpful.
Dude, I think everyone needs therapy.
Dude, I agree.
It's eye-opening. Like, yeah. I mean, after going, I mean, for years now, and seeing how it just makes you realize so much you learn so much about yourself, like the way you think. You become so much more self-aware. And then once you hit that point, you start to realize how many people around you aren't self-aware, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, it's like people are walking dark, like they're walking blind out here.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So therapy, ongoing therapy. Like daily practices.
Let's see.
Stuff that you found helpful, and whether that's reading, going to the gym, meditation.
Okay, so the therapy, you know, obviously we'll give that. That's kind of a given. That was like once a week. The next biggest thing was getting in a routine again. Because when I look back at, you know, my life through high school, or, you know, my whole life up to that point, I had always been in a pretty strict routine, and I didn't realize it at the time because it was like it had been life. It was school, sports, homework, you know, whatever, school, sports, homework, yeah. so once that was like stripped away, for instance, like once I moved back home, and this is really when I picked up all these, solid habits that I realized were, like lifelong habits that keep you healthy mentally and physically. Number one was not having too much downtime, especially with COVID and, work. Am still working fully remote. It's very easy to wake up, work in the same room you slept in, and, maybe make it out like once or twice a day to get some lunch or something. And then very quickly it starts to have a very negative effect. Not having a social life, I realized was very important. So I started, I started doing jujitsu. That was actually a recommendation from my psychologist because he had done martial arts his whole life. And he was a collegiate athlete, but just as someone who had played sports in general, he was saying this is a great, aggressive, I guess, martial arts or good for, people who played football, to keep yourself like athletic and
competitive.
Yeah. And there's a ranking system, like you're constantly working towards the next belt or the next, stripe or whatever. So that was a huge, and on top of, the jiu-jitsu itself, it was the community. That was probably the biggest aspect. And, going every day made it like having sports practice again. So it was like, okay, like every, 7 to 8, I go to jiu-jitsu. Okay. So that was like the first, I guess, checkbox. I was like, okay, this is like the first thing I get involved in. And then the gym, I started changing up the gym. So, and come to find out, this was actually had a big impact, but I hadn't done cardio for probably like 5 years. Didn't do in college. And that was another thing my psychologist was saying was to get, 4 sessions of 30-minute cardio sessions like a week. So I started, I would go to the gym in the morning, and then either would maybe come back after work and do just like a cardio workout, or like we run in my neighborhood. Started off with like running, and then once I kind of got hooked on jiu-jitsu, and I was like, oh, like I'll start learning how to, do the bags. And I took a boxing class like outside of college. It was at like a boxing gym for a semester. So I had like the fundamentals. So I was like, okay, I'll start doing bags. Like I used to do swim team. Like I really like swimming. I'll start swimming. Like, so I started mixing all these different like cardio sessions. And when you go like swimming, it's not, half the time, after like I swim laps, it's like enjoyable, so it's like, it didn't suck, cause I hated running. Still don't like it, but I can make myself do it. But so the second thing, cardio, having that, getting your heart rate up, I don't know, obviously all the science behind it other than the fact that, I've heard a lot of professionals preach the importance of having physical activity. Yeah. What else? The meditation was a big one. Also probably the hardest one to make myself stay consistent with. That is, I have like an app on my phone that will do
Headspace
guided. It's called, it's a sleeping app, but now they've like branched out to, they've added all types of meditation. It's called Better Sleep. But I started out using it for like rain noises when I sleep, and then realized that there was like a premium and they give you like a ton of stuff with it. So I was like, I'll try this out. Plus I wanted to implement that habit in my life. So I was like, that, we're going to spend money, like I'm going to spend it on this. So learned how to, meditate. At first didn't see the effects. I honestly don't think I was really doing it right. Just in terms of clearing my head and just trying to like live purely in the moment and, focus on breathing. And then after a while I stopped doing it for probably like a few months. And then, I think I went to like a doctor's appointment for a checkup, and he brought it up again and was like, yeah, I meditate every day. Like, I notice a big difference when I don't. And I was like, I don't do it at all. And like, let's see, maybe I'm doing something wrong. So kind of like took another shot at it. And honestly, genuinely would notice a difference. I mean, still do, obviously, whenever I do it. It's not, I would like to get in a better habit of it for sure right now. But just waking up and, you know, when your mind is quiet and you know, still waking up and not focused on other things, is really nice to just, you know, sit there and, you know, I guess there's different types of meditation and, but I'll kind of just sit there and be like, breathe in, breathe out, like, or maybe listen to, you know, like a guided meditation about, like there's one for cravings. So I don't know if there's like nicotine or something, you can like listen to that and it'll, you know, kind of like walk you through being mindful of whatever it is you're experiencing, like taking a step back and, you know, trying to view yourself having like the experience, you know, which I actually found to be very helpful. So yeah, those are probably the three biggest things that I'd say I incorporated. And you know, through incorporating those, was the downtime was significantly less. And then, you know, I would, if, you know, I was having a really good day, like, you know, when I got home from jiu-jitsu, like after, you know, I had done these other habits during the day, you know, like you mentioned, like would try to start reading, or maybe like write in a journal. You know, that idea to me always was so like cringy. I was like, I'm not going to write my thoughts down. Like I'm never going to read this again. And while that still pretty much remained true, I realized like in the act of writing it down,
the physical act, it's crazy.
Was able to almost like solidify the thoughts into my like memory, and you know, the patterns I was noticing in my thoughts or in my day, you know, I could realize them and, you know, after becoming aware of them, you know, fix them. But you know.
Yeah, I think the writing thing is, I tried for a while like incorporating a journaling practice. Like I tried it every day. Like, okay, right, like I'll do a morning journal or like a nighttime. Like my thing was like every night, like recap the day. But like it eventually got into this thing where it felt more like a task, because like I was like checking the box that I did it for the day, but I wasn't getting anything out of it. So like eventually circled to the place like what I do now is like a weekly recap. But I try to be like less of like Monday I did groceries, Tuesday I did jiu-jitsu, Thursday I did weights, whatever. Like instead of being like a recap of the events, it's like, how was my mental state? Like first line is like, this was a pretty good week. I felt really good through the front half, struggle, whatever, you know, like talk about how you felt going through it. And it's like I'm stacking these journals as I fill these pages, right? They're just like sitting in my closet. I don't know, like if I travel and move, are they just going to go into storage? Am I going to bin them? Like, I don't really ever imagine going back until I'm like older and then be like, what did I think on January 27th, 2021?
Yeah.
Like it's cool, I guess, to be able to call back to that. I don't know that I'm going to gain any massive insight, but in those moments, externalizing your thoughts is like so important, because like just forcing yourself to like still them and freeze them on a page versus just like it's this ongoing like stream, right? Like you bounce, and like with the neuroplasticity thing, like our brains are so powerful, it's like pew, 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 like it's shooting all different directions, making millions of connections you can't even imagine at once. And so like you literally slow your brain down. I was listening to a podcast the other day about, and there's a book about it. I really wish I remember the lady's name, but she came up with this thing called the 5-second rule. And essentially the book is about it. It's about her life story. She like hits rock bottom in her life, like financial destitution, all this stuff. And she came to this epiphany when watching, you know, she was like alcoholic at home, and she's sitting there like getting shit hammered watching TV, and this commercial with like I think it was like Rocket Mortgage or something comes on with a rocket, and it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And she's like, that's gonna be me tomorrow morning. And like it's really kind of dumb sounding, and she admits that in the interview she was talking about it. But she said, I gave myself 5 seconds. I would just count back down from 5, and then I started moving. You know, all right, you're lying in bed. You don't want to get out of bed. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Feet are on the ground. And what she came to find out, you know, like this was kind of just like her with this idea, right? This dumb idea to get her to start moving. But come to find out as she does more research about it, it's about forcing your mind to be focused, go out of that passive thinking loop, that like, I guess it's the like midbrain, and go to the like focused analytical side where you're kind of like in the driver's seat, I guess.
Yeah.
And you're fixating on the countdown. The actual act of putting your mind into that countdown gets you in control on it. So I think writing is a lot of the same thing, where all these thoughts running left, right, different, whatever, but you're slowing it down. You're like actually like pumping heavy on the brakes of your brain. So you're not like expanding it in any way, but you're like distilling all of that stuff. And it's crazy to like look down at the paper and be like, wow, that was pretty dumb. You know what I mean? Like you get to start, it's so much easier to talk yourself out of negative thinking patterns or anxieties or whatever it is, you know, like a huge thing like when I've dealt with like the heartbreaks of going through my relationships is like writing about how I'm feeling. And then I read it back. I'm like, dude, if your friend came to you and said this shit, like,
So true.
what would you say to him? You know what I mean? And then you can have that bit of a dialogue with yourself. You're like, okay.
It's a great exercise, honestly.
Yeah, like you don't have to like block out those feelings, but getting to see it there, you're just like, okay, like this is contextually important. A lot of this is just me trapped in my dome. Like let me get it out of my mind and onto this paper. So yeah, super valuable.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I guess after all that, and now into this place where, you know, you have the rest of your life ahead of you. We're both like, what, you're 23 too also?
Yeah, I just turned 24 actually.
Congrats. Missed the birthday, but
no big deal.
but happy belated, I guess. What would you say, this is a typical like a closer that I'm starting to use as my calling card as I develop episode, I guess this is episode 8.
Okay.
Episode 8. What are the most important three of the most important lessons you've learned along your path to becoming the current best version of yourself? And then what is, like, I'm a pretty huge quote guy myself. So what is a quote that you live by or feel like defines your mindset or worldview? And you can piece those. You can do it in either order.
Okay. I'm going to say the quote. Which honestly, yeah, I do my best to live by. It's definitely something I believe, but I'm not even sure where it came from. I saw it in a movie. I think it's in Lone Sniper or...
Oh, Lone Survivor?
Or, I mean, yeah.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Basically, it's whatever you... If it's worth doing, then do it to, you know, your
anything
full
worth doing is... Anything in life worth doing is worth overdoing.
Yeah. Actually, I'm pretty sure that's still my Instagram bio.
There you go.
But just, I mean, when I think about that, the way I kind of interpret it is, you know, if you can apply it to everyday situations, if I'm going to, like, if going to the gym is worth it, like, I'm going to, like, go hard at it. I'm not going to go there and just passively, you know, sit there and lollygag around, or, like, you know, I'm going to go get involved. You know, I'm going to go get involved in jiu-jitsu. Like, all right, I'm not just going to, like, show up once a week and, like, check it off my list. Like, I'm going to genuinely try to, like, soak it up and learn. And if I don't like it, then, you know, I can say screw it and I'll try something else. But, you know, whatever, you know, is grabbing your attention in life, you know, that's good. You know, go all in. You know, what do you have to lose? I don't see why, you know, you would, you know, do something that you choose, I guess, and go half-heartedly at it. You know, I feel like you always experience, you know, the best of the highs and, you know, the worst of the lows when you're fully, you know, when it has your full attention. And that's also, you know, how you absorb, you know, your, I guess, full potential of the situation is, I guess, you know, being fully, you know, involved in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd say that's probably my quote. 3 lessons that what?
I'd say 3 of the most important lessons. Like if someone was like, hey, I'm I'm Ryan in 2018. Like, I'm going through it, whatever it is. What are 3 lessons that you've learned along this path that's going to make my path less painful? Like, how am I going to get out of this?
The first one, nothing lasts forever. That was a big one that, I mean, it's still probably my favorite lesson I think that I've learned. And it stemmed from the OCD and, has manifested itself in different ways. But, bad situations, however bad they seem in the moment, it's never as bad. I think, a lot of times people will get so caught up in the moment and the emotion of how they feel, and they'll do something, really rash or make a stupid decision that could potentially alter their life. And having that mindset of this is how things are now. This is, it can be dangerous, because it can really make you, live in a different way, and kind of live out of your potential because you start to lose faith and kind of confidence in yourself. But yeah, just to have perspective, I think is really what it kind of the same thing. But zoom out if you're in a really shitty part of your life, and you feel like you can't see a way out of it. Number one, you're wrong. There's a way out. And number two, try to learn something while you're going through it. Knowing that the situation isn't going to be there forever. Learn just like when you're in the highs. It's easy to learn then. It's obviously a lot harder when life sucks. But if you try to look around and be this isn't going to last forever. So, I might as well, try to learn something about, how maybe if I'm in this situation in the future, or I can, give some advice to someone else who's going through it about, things that made, my time while I was there better.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of corny, but, always be your biggest supporter. I think it's crucial to develop, a self-confidence, and, be sure of yourself. For me, again, that was kind of during that breakthrough moment I had, after freshman year, and it's carried over many times, when I've had kind of been in that same position, or, would have a big, metaphorically a fall, and I felt like I was at rock bottom again. Being able to deal with that, and wait, what was the
what do you mean?
Second, what did I just say? The second.
Oh, always be your biggest supporter.
But yeah, gaining that confidence, and I guess not being too hard on yourself, and learning how to love yourself is, I feel like that is not really stressed enough. You can't, I think I've heard this in a previous episode of your podcast, but if you're not investing in yourself and you're not loving yourself, how are you going to help other people? So yeah, I think, loving yourself and, just, life is a learning experience. It's not, obviously no one's perfect. So be kind to yourself. Honestly, another one probably would be stay true to yourself, especially going to a giant college like UGA, very diverse, pretty much in every sense. Very easy to get wrapped up and kind of lose your identity. I feel like that's something you'd hear at a church service, and definitely was something that our youth pastor, I remember,
I was going to say, it's something we did here at church services.
Yeah, going off to college and them stressing that. But really, I mean, and I think the way that looks is, having a solid group of friends that, know you and know what you're about and how you want to be, and, holding each other accountable. I think staying true to yourself, when you, develop a set of values and a sense of identity that you have built and spend time thinking about, and once you establish that, I think sticking, really like keeping that kind of like at the forefront of your life of this is who I am, this is what I believe, and doesn't matter the situation I'm in or the people I'm around or the place I am, I will stay true to myself and what I believe, and that's what I'm going to do. And if you don't like that, then screw you. But yeah, I mean, once you develop your own beliefs, it's like, what, this is who I am, like this is what I am. No one's going to tell me any differently. And it kind of like gives you a sense of empowerment almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, those would probably be the three things.
Well, I think those are all really, really excellent, and I think you put them really, really well. Well, I have to say, Ryan, I am honestly blown away by your story. Thank you for having the courage and willingness to share with myself, but also the world. I don't know what our captive audience is right now, right? It's not the Joe Rogan podcast, but I know that certainly people are listening. I know that this has and will touch the hearts of people either going through it or have gone through it. And that's why I wanted to have you share your story, and I'm so glad you were willing to.
Absolutely.
I think it speaks to your character. It speaks to, the strength that you have developed through your story. And I mean, I'm definitely blown away. I really, really appreciate it. And, for those listening, if you want to reach out to myself, I can pass along any words to Ryan, but as far as what you're working on, is there anything you want to plug right now? Where can people follow you or reach out to you?
Instagram, Ryan M. Reid, R-E-I-D. And yeah, I mean, if that's pretty much Instagram, that's it. If not, you can reach out to Zach and forward my phone number along. For sure. Well, thanks again for coming on. And thank you to everyone who has stuck it in and listened this far. I think it's been an incredible, incredible episode. I think one that's really, really powerful. So I will say again, if you want to continue to follow along, follow at Vitruvian Gentleman on Instagram, at ZDSCHENKEN, myself on Instagram. If you enjoyed the podcast, DM me your thoughts. If you want to reach out to Ryan, I'm happy to pass on his information. So thank you for spending your time with us today. Remember, your time is your most valuable resource. And thanks for spending a little bit of it with myself and Ryan. Memento Mori, and I will see you on next week's episode of the Vitruvian Man Podcast.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.